Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for the nice introduction. And I apologize for individually having a long job title and making a really long title for the presentation that I made you read there. And as Stephanie said, thank you to everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate you participating. We will, throughout the process, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them, as Stephanie said, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So just a couple quick housekeeping objectives to get to before we get started. Today's presentation is going to focus on three main points. And first, I just want to talk about the category mapping structure of ExamSoft. For those of you who aren't too familiar with ExamSoft, I will touch on it a little bit and define what categories are and how to access them and how to utilize them. And for those of you that are familiar with this process, I promise I won't take too long on that. We'll specifically talk about how that process can be used in giving students specific feedback. Second, we'll also talk about the value that mapping process can provide in student success on future examinations. And finally, it would be my goal that after this presentation, you'd be able to create your own categorization process or edit your current process in a way that would be most conducive to improving student self-awareness and improving their exam outcomes. So those are the three main points we'll get to, and really I'll kind of handle those in three really distinct little sections throughout today's webinar. So first of all, again, just a quick housekeeping item of what are categories for those of you that aren't familiar with categories. In your ExamSoft browser, there's three main areas. There's your questions and your assessments, which if you do use ExamSoft, I'm sure you use quite often. And then there is the categories section, which is separate from those two. And categories allow us to tag each question with any category that we choose. So I have a list up there: subject matter, difficulty level, author, and the list goes on. And you can place items in an unlimited number of categories, and really you can make the categories whatever most appropriate for your curriculum, your university, and your students. The examples that we have there are some of the examples that we use here at OSU, and we go beyond that. With today focusing on student success, I'll just really talk about the subject matter, the content is what we're going to focus on for the most part today. But we even go beyond that and look at accreditation and other things as far as helping us to map our curriculum even further. One of the great uses of the categories that we can acquire stats based on each category to learn the information that we want. And this, actually, I think the next slide has this information. This can be done at any time. So as far as pulling the stats. So as I mentioned, it's when tagging a question in ExamSoft into a category, it can be easily done when the question is being created. You can do it after the fact. We do both at OSU. If we get new questions in, currently since we started this new process, we will have our faculty members give us the appropriate categories for what task we're trying to accomplish. For these, the way we have our curriculum set up, and which I'll touch on in a moment, we don't necessarily need the faculty or the content expert to help with this this process of providing students feedback on the specific content areas. But again, if we have questions that are a couple of years old, in fact, prior to putting this webinar together, when I looked at some old stats, I realized we had some questions that weren't categorized appropriately. So I was just able to go back and add those, again, just from the question view. And you can in your question folders, you can actually bulk edit. So you can, if one set of 50 questions all go into one or two categories, you can actually do that in one step, which is a great help, especially when you're going back retroactively to look at stats. This has been especially helpful as we went through our curriculum change, which we did in the fall of 2014. So that has been very helpful in us comparing our old curriculum statistics to our new curriculum. With the fourth point there, categories should be pre-made. So that's the way that we found it easiest, is that you have your category structure set up, have a sound category structure in place, and then it makes it so much easier to, when you're importing new questions or typing new questions directly in, or even going back retroactively to categorized questions, if that system's in place pretty solidly, it makes that a really quick, easy process. And then finally, the categorized work as folder structures is necessary. This has been helpful for us in every phase of working with categories, whether it's been looking at student achievement in specific content areas, what I'm going to speak on today, or even mapping our curriculum and looking at how we're addressing learning objectives within a course. So that's been a big help, and I definitely recommend to be mindful of that feature as you set your categories up. Oh, Stephanie, I think I'm going to set the record for most times someone saying categories in a webinar. Anyway, so let's talk about how we do it at OSU. So with our program logistics, we actually have our items are categorized by faculty or our instructional design staff, and that's at my office, and there's 3 of us total that work with that. Specifically for this program of giving students specific feedback to help them with their studying and for their future exam prep, we don't really need content experts, and this says it on my next slide, but because of the nature of our curriculum being a systems-based curriculum, and I'll mention that on the next slide a little more. But since the way that our classes are identified by content, just in the way that they're listed in the syllabus and in our course schedule, us non-content experts are very easily able to categorize a whole exam. And truthfully, if you haven't categorized a whole exam before, if you know how you're going to do it and don't need to read through the items piece by piece, it can be done in a matter of minutes. I mean, a 100-question exam maybe could be done in 5 minutes or so. So that's just the process up front of how we get those into the system. At the end of the exam, category stats are then sent to faculty and students by our staff here, and we do it as soon as possible. I know I mentioned this somewhere in this presentation. We typically do it after the faculty have reviewed the exam to see if any changes are going to be made. We have realized in the past that if you send those out too early, and as I'm sure some of you know, that students like to calculate their own grades, that if what is indicated in a category report doesn't necessarily jive with what's on their actual score, even if their actual score is improved over what they've done the math on, they tend to get a little worked up, and our faculty have had their email inboxes flooded. So at their request, we always wait to make sure that all changes to the exam have been made. We typically will at least send the category reports first to the faculty member, to the course coordinator making the decisions on the exam, but we hold off on the student stats and even the stats for the other faculty members until after all decisions are final. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, at OSU we have a systems-based curriculum. So in each of our courses, in each of our systems courses, we have several different areas of content on one exam. And so what we were realizing is that when we were giving students feedback on their exams, it was traditionally just they would get their exam score, and if they chose to, they could then go pursue a faculty or staff member, however each course sets this up. That's up to their discretion, but they would then visit with a staff member typically and review their exam. And in talking to some students, that was nice to be able to obviously see the exam questions after the exam, but they really couldn't pick up themes of where they were doing well or where they were doing poorly. It was just individual question by question, and then trying to run out of that meeting and remember where they did poorly and try to improve that. But again, they couldn't really get a big picture view of their performance on specific content areas within those exams. So that's when we realized that the new curriculum structure really dictated that we need to give them some more specific information back to help them prepare for future exams, again, outside of their grade and a quick 5-minute look over of the exam items. So specific to this process, and again, just to kind of look at our the overall goal of what we were doing with this, is to give students the necessary feedback to allow them to guide future exam prep, obviously with the goal of increasing their outcomes on future exams and to guide their studying. So we really looked at items just by the primary content matter. So in medicine, that's the large content areas for first and second year didactic classes are things like histology, pharmacology, physiology, and a few others. And then we also in our curriculum with the systems, we have specific class meetings that are all case-based, and then we also have an area what we call clinical problem solving, which is a small group exercise, a set of small group exercises actually in each system where the students will work through clinical cases in a group with a faculty member to to diagnose and treat the patients in their cases. So, and we specifically have exam items that are given to us from faculty that come from those case-based learning sessions and those small group clinical problem solving sessions. So since those items bring in all of the content into play for students to diagnose and treat the patients in the cases, whether it's in a large classroom setting or in the small group setting, we decided in lieu of adding histopharm, phys, path, all those to each item, that wouldn't really tell us a whole lot. So we set those items aside by calling them case-based learning or clinical problem solving. So as I mentioned quite a bit on the previous slide, we do have the faculty member review the exam statistics, the exam itself, and after any changes are made to the exam, we release the results to the students via ExamSoft. Again, just to take a quick step back, that process, if you're new to ExamSoft, is in the assessments page or section. If you go specifically into your assessments, where you have your student results area, and you can see the scores on that drop down at the top, where you can find the item analysis and all that. You can there's a release results tab that will allow you to send this information out to students. With this, you can send any information out. We at OSU, we allow our faculty to have discretion over what items are sent to students. So you can send everything from the full exam, including content. And when I say send out to them, it'll be available in their ExamSoft portal. That bottom note, as I say, I always recommend to send it with there's an option where you can send with email. I would always do that. We've had folks at times that just post it, and students aren't really, at least here, aren't really trained yet to go and always just randomly check their ExamSoft portal to see if changes have been updated. But this way, they'll get an email with, I think it's 4 basic steps of a link, and then how to access their information in there. So again, for each exam, you can send out, you can include any information you want, or you can have it literally just be their score or their percentage, and anything in between. It's through that process, when I say results released, that we send out this category report. Again, this is something that we do here in our department. So pre-exam, again, we make sure everything's categorized appropriately, and then post-exam, we just do one more check through on it to make sure everything's good to go and the number of questions adds up appropriately, and then we release the results to the students just with a quick email saying, the category report for whatever exam is posted, and see the instructions below. And then and students typically access that pretty quickly. This is a quick screenshot of our category structure. When I talking about how we set it up and how we categorize it by content, you can see, hopefully you can see the mouse on the screen. we do, we have some content areas that we have there, and we have other, other content areas there as well. We'll look at specific classes to see, if we're looking at, basic science or clinical application as well. That's a little bit more in depth that we use on the back end with statistics. For what we release to students, we primarily just focus on those large content areas. We looked into breaking it down a little bit more and trying to give them more specific information than just saying, immunology, microbiology, and that's something that we'd like to do in the future if possible. But we've noticed that if we break it down by, course objectives or individual lectures, that we're only having, 2 to 4 questions sometimes per category. So that wasn't really giving students, a broad enough overview of their results. It was almost too specific. So the big picture wasn't there for them, and it wasn't really helpful to see, how to make a game plan moving forward to studying when they just thought, okay, I got a 2 out of 4 on, Dr. So-and-so's lecture. It just didn't resonate with them since it was such a small stat and such a small sample set. So that's why we stuck with this as our setup. So moving forward with the structure and methodology of this program that we have set up for receiving category feedback. Each student has a faculty advisor, and they also receive these stats. So we're kind of going at them from both angles. That we make the students self-aware of their performance and let them get those stats available to them directly. But again, we also have a faculty advisor that receives those as well. That way, if the student is continuing to struggle and their advisor can see a theme that they're continually struggling on pharmacology questions, they can make an action plan for that student, again, based on that feedback that we've given them to work on their exam prep for future exams. And that's really the primary use that we've got out of this program thus far, is that students are able to appropriately see that and make that game plan at the same time. If they are struggling and maybe aren't using that information as much as they should, they do have a faculty advisor that can kind of give them a little push in that direction, or they can also see hey, you're lacking here, so let's focus here a little bit more. As I have there in the bottom note, the students and faculty do have discretion over how this information is utilized. So we don't have a formalized program that forces them into any sort of during course remediation or any like study groups or study tables or anything of that nature. At our school, in dealing with medical students, they're already pretty well into their and understanding their learning methods and their and knowing what study habits are best for them. This program is just more empowering them with the information of knowing where to focus their studies. But we don't, unless they work on it one-on-one with their faculty advisor, we don't give them specific study tips or anything of that nature from, again, as a part of this process. So just kind of winding down here over the next couple slides. I guess the results, first of all, this program started for at-risk students. So when we would give this information directly to the faculty advisor for those students that were struggling in a given area. And so it was, if they had under 70% on an exam, their faculty advisor would make sure to bring them in. And we would also make sure we highlighted all the areas in which a student scored under 80 on in a specific content area. So if they had a 72 in physiology, we would actually make Excel spreadsheets and highlight that for the faculty advisor and send those over to them. And that was going well. It was a good start for us with that. Unfortunately, we realized that we're kind of shortchanging the rest of the students, and that there were other students that wanted this information. And so when the word, I'm sure as you know, if anyone who works with students, that word with students travels incredibly fast. And I mean, if you could tell one student something today, and by tomorrow everyone will know. And so student leadership quickly requested from us that all this information be given to all students. So again, at first, I think we released this information just directly to their faculty, but if students were doing well overall on the exams, they weren't always necessarily forced to meet with their faculty advisor. If someone got an A on an exam, the faculty advisor wasn't going to bring them in saying that the student was doing well. However, that same student may have gotten an A with a 92% on the exam, and they may have done really, really strongly in pathology and pharm, but then when we looked at the stats, they had a 73% on histology. So while they were strong overall, they were able to pull their grades up, or their grade on the individual exams up, by being really strong in certain areas, but again, they were lacking in others. And so we wanted to give them this information to students as early on as possible, so that before it turned into a trend for them, or before they even potentially fell behind in a given area, because they didn't really realize they were struggling there, because again, the overall exam grade was pretty solid, so they just were happy with their results, and again, not self-aware of their performance in those specific areas. So with this, the student feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. We actually have an anonymous curriculum feedback on our website, and we do get since the beginning of this program, we've gotten several positive responses from our students, saying that they appreciate it, or that they rely on it quite a bit to understand their performance, and to go back and learn the information better in areas where they're struggling before the next exam. We've had several students, like I said, at the bottom note, that it is very helpful in preparing for those future exams. I didn't want to put a negative statement in writing there, but if we ever fall behind in our area and don't send out the category report a few hours after the exam, or directly after the grades are released, we hear about that as well. So we definitely know that there is this is something students are waiting on to review the results and use going forward. Like I said, they as quickly as they are to tell us when they appreciate something. And sometimes they can be a little bit faster about telling us when they would like more information, or when they think that we're slacking a little. Not that we slack in my department, if anyone at my work is listening to this. Okay, so more tangible results. This slide here has, we did a comparison of 2015 exams and the systems courses in which we did not give category results to all students, and then the 2016 results in which category reports were provided to all students. And we just looked at the change between student outcomes. We compared their performance between their performance in specific content areas between exam 1 and exam 2. This isn't in a specific systems course. We took all of our systems courses in which we took this program and put them together. We really want to see, since all of these the items on the screen are taught in all of our systems courses, we want to see if curriculum-wide, if we had noticeable gains, if this is something that they were improving from exam 1 to exam 2, if it was something that was truly helpful, and if it's if we should continue to go forward with this, and we're really early on with a lot of these statistics, so we're really just trying to find our way right now as far as what information we can compile and use to hopefully grow this program to fine-tune it to be exactly what the students need as far as exam prep. So right now it is, as the title mentions of this webinar, is focusing on their self-awareness, but we're continuing to look to see how else we can assist with guiding their exam prep to improve their outcomes in each class. So you can see with the results slide here within pharmacology in 2015, from exam 1 to exam 2, student grades actually went down a little bit by 1.19%, which is marginal at best. And in 2016, in those those same courses with the content from exam 1, after the exam 1 in 2016, we did get them those category results with the content specific feedback, and they actually improved their pharm grades by a little over 4%. And while it doesn't look it doesn't jump off the page, a crazy amount as far as being too statistically outstanding, it's 5 total percent that their grades jumped, which is half of a letter grade in our institution. So we take that to be, when we're looking at 115 students, we see a 5% jump as something that is really encouraging, and a program that I would like to see where else we can go with this. Same thing with physiology. Students went from doing worse from exam 1 to exam 2 to improving, and the overall jump again was about 5%. And then we even saw them in our case-based learning and our clinical problem-solving questions, which actually involve more in-depth thought process with our students, because they're actually applying the information. They're applying the pharm and the phys and the path and all those things into and putting them together to answer these case-based questions in the large case-based learning sessions. They're again using those all together in their small groups to diagnose and treat the patients in the clinical cases that they receive. So any improvement there, especially the clinical problem solving, again jumping almost half a letter grade, we felt was really encouraging, especially with those two items when you work with students in the first and second year in medical school. They are so geared toward learning the content specifically, and at times just trying to memorize that content, memorize the phys or the path, and that they aren't always the best at necessarily looking at the large picture of combining those things together to then make a clinical decision on as far as in one of their cases. So we're really happy to see that we were able to improve their exam to exam improvement from one year to the next. And really there wasn't any other tangible outstanding change to our to the curriculum. We're in the third year, I believe now. So we're starting to settle in with our teaching methods and starting to shape our content the way that we want. So there wasn't too much of other tangible changes that really stand out, other than providing them this extra information, help with their studying, and providing that information to their faculty advisor, again, to help with creating an action plan for them going forward. So just kind of bringing it together and moving forward. I mentioned a couple times now that we're pretty early on in this process, and it's something right now we're starting to see positive results. We're definitely getting positive feedback from our students, and we would like to include some items though in our course evaluations and our post-course focus group discussions to really identify not whether or not they use it, because we have the feedback that says they do use it, but how do they utilize this information, just to see if there's anything that we can provide on our end that will give them more specific information that can be helpful to them. Or if we have specific students that are using this information successfully, how are they using it, and then how can we share that with other students to implement use of this this feedback, the category results into their studying if they aren't already using it. We're also looking forward, and we're getting into this more now as far as comparing our category content information with our board results to see if we're as an institution for how we are preparing our students for boards and what we can do to improve that process as well. And again, having that combined with some of that the student evaluations and the student discussion feedback is something we're looking forward to bringing together to see if we can not only understand just the raw statistics of this, but also the how it's being utilized, and see if we can create a more specific program going forward that's useful for students. And then finally, we would like to provide students with more specific information on their exam performance. As I mentioned previously, it's pretty difficult to, that's a pretty fine line for us to walk, we've found so far, because you definitely can give too much specific information to where it's almost meaningless to them. So right now, with having the systems-based curriculum and having these large content areas that are featured in each course, we're pretty happy with where we are right now with that. But if there is other information, not necessarily content information, but right now in our institution, we also categorize by instructional method to see if student outcomes are improved by specific instructional methods used in the classroom. If that's something that we can give to students as well, if we find that useful, so students can understand how they learn best in the classroom, that's something that we're also interested in looking down the road, and not necessarily only at just these content specific feedback from them. So really, in conclusion to all that, we were able to use these category reports through a pretty simple setup of having a folder structure set in our category section by content, amongst other things. But it's something that has been really utilized by our students, and they're continuing to ask for more of it. So it's been a really positive process for us so far, and some of the preliminary stats are showing that it looks like we are getting some positive results out of it. So we're just hoping to continue to grow that, and as the years go on, have a wider selection of stats to go through on these category reports and on our exam results to see if we can notice more trends, and to see if we're what else we can do to improve student outcomes other than what we're doing right now with improving their self-awareness of their performance, and again, making their faculty advisors aware so they can help guide their exam prep. So that is all I have at this point. I really do, again, appreciate your attendance today. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take them now. If you don't have any questions now but try this later, feel free to shoot me an email, or if you're watching this on the recording, again, feel free to shoot me an email at any time. I'm more than happy to talk about this. So, thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. We are going to go ahead and open the forum up for a Q&A now. So if you have questions for Dan, now is the time to stick them into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. Should be on the right-hand side of your screen. We do already have a couple that have come in, Dan, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. First question is, who decides what your category structure will be? Was that done by a committee, or was it done within your department?
It was, the actual folder structure is dictated by, as far as the setup, it's done by our department. So we're the Office of Educational Development, and that's, we're the administrators in ExamSoft, and we make that decision with how the category setup is done, because we're the ones that work specifically in there. However, as far as the decision-making for the content of what our categories are, that's really dictated by the task at hand. So in this situation, it was dictated by the fact that we needed to give students better feedback to help them prepare for future exams. We work with this in accreditation as well. So that process is dictated of the folder structure for that, to make sure that we're appropriately addressing all of the competencies for our accrediting body. So for the most part, it's the tasks that are that need to be completed that really dictate that. With that being said, if a faculty member wanted to look at specific stats from an exam and create categories, they would have full discretion to be able to do that as well, whether that was through our department or if they were one of our more savvy faculty users that is comfortable running the reports themselves, they can do that themselves as well. And we have sections in our categories set up for each faculty member if they choose to do that in addition to the statistics that we provide. That was a really good question. Thank you.
And I think you actually just answered the follow-up question was, can faculty add their own categories as well, or are they only able to use the approved categories?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. And they can add their own. They have the access in ExamSoft to do that. However, I guess we prefer that they go through us only in that, you know, when you have several users in a program, if multiple users are in a specific area and adding or deleting or whatever it may be, you just kind of have too many cooks in the kitchen, and it can get really sloppy too fast. And we ran into that every now and again, and when those situations arise, sometimes we'll actually go and sit with the faculty members then and kind of work as a unit to really identify what it is they're looking for, and then just kind of show them the ropes as far as how we have things set up. So we don't just turn our faculty loose and say, hey, have at it. I'm sure we have a large number of faculty members that don't even know that this exists specifically the way that we have it in there, just that they know we provide them stats. We typically like to meet with them first, but once we do meet, I mean, at the end of the day, they have full autonomy in there if they so choose to do so.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, has any of this information been used for curricular or course content revision?
That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. We have a few areas that we've looked at with this, and actually one of the areas is really simple, was just a sheer quantity of questions. Sometimes we, as you change to a new curriculum, like we did just 3 years ago, there's so many moving parts that actually using this process to categorize our items really helped keep us on track as far as exam construction, as far as, you know, how many questions per credit hour we were taking and putting on an exam, and then specifically how many items we were taking from specific content areas and putting onto an exam. So I know that's really, really raw data just as far as sheer quantity, but we have looked at statistics specific to teaching methods. And if I actually think I may have talked about this in a previous presentation where we looked at team-based learning specific to physiology, and we noticed that students were performing at a much higher level on our course exams when our faculty members were using team-based learning with physiology as opposed to traditional lecture. And so because of that, we continue to grow our team-based learning instructional method specific to phys. And in that course specifically was renal physiology. And we've continued to see that trend grow with our students. So really, we've used it for minor tweaks post-exam change, and then we've also used it for some changes within each course as far as, again, teaching methods are concerned.
Okay, that's all that we have for today. Thank you, Dan, for your presentation. It was very informative. Thank you, everyone who took time out of their days to attend today. We know we're wrapping up the semester. It's a busy time of year, so we appreciate your attendance. Just as a reminder, when you close out of the GoToWebinar control panel, you will get a pop-up that will have a quick 5-question survey. We would really appreciate you taking the time to fill that out. Also, today's presentation has been recorded, and you should get a follow-up email here within a couple of days with a link to the recording. If you'd like to listen to it again, share with your peers, you're more than welcome to do so. Again, thank you to everybody, and we appreciate your attendance, and we'll see you next time.